Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being with us this rainy evening, and also which is a quite interesting day in Austrian politics. So my name is Thomas Seifert. I'm Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Wiener Zeitung, actually the world's oldest newspaper still in print. We published in 1703 and buried the independence of 13 colonies in some far distant land somewhere in the pages, and had some sea battle in the front page, which nobody remembers today. So you see, journalism is the first draft of history. We don't always get it right, but I just scanned, I'm working on a story on Tiananmen, which is 4th of June 1989 coming up, and we got that one right. So it was on page 1, of course, and was a huge story. And as the year is, progressing, we will have more of these dates in 1989. And I'm very happy today to have you all here because we are discussing something about which is, of course, also looking back these 30 years. Is a topic that is, I think, very actual on a day like this. And the topic is Millennials on democracy. And of course, it relates to 1989. I was 21 back then. Some of my panelists are almost at young age or a bit older maybe, but still look very fresh, much fresher than me, of course. And I'm very happy that Wiener Zeitung can co-host this event and being kind of your partner here in Vienna. And we will jump right into the topic basically after this first round of introduction. And I give the microphone over to Alex because, of course, Globsec is our partner here. And it's wonderful to have you from Bratislava here in Vienna. Alex, please.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure on behalf of Globsec to welcome you here. I would like to say the first thank you notes. First to Thomas and Wiener Zeitung for partnering with us, and secondly with Impact Hub for hosting us here. It is the first time when we take City Talks as our instrument for public consultation outside Slovakia. This year, ahead of our Globsec Forum, which will happen from the 6th to the 8th of June in Bratislava, just across the river, we are expecting over 1,000 guests from around 60 countries, and we will have a rock-solid conference. So going back to City Talks, it's the first time when we are out of Slovakia. We had one City Talks also in Prague just a couple of weeks ago, and we are ending the series here in Vienna today with, as Thomas said, a topic that is more relevant as ever. And it's not just that the politics is interesting in Austria today, it's also interesting in Romania, my homeland. So we will for sure have a chance to discuss also the immediate results of the European elections and how they play out around. Just a few words about myself. I joined Globsec a year ago. I was previously posted with the OSCE in what's today named North Macedonia. I was in the US for a couple of years and also based in Georgia. So my expertise is mostly in post-conflict and conflict management. I am the Strategic Forums Director at Globsec, as I mentioned. I joined a year ago, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that's happening at Globsec. One of the major think tanks in Central and Eastern Europe, founded 15 years ago. And I will pass mic to Francis, but not before saying that I was one when the revolution in Romania started, and I'm originally from Timișoara. My parents were on the stairs of the cathedral just in the first days of the civic unrest, or the revolution as it's currently politically correct to say, but it was a civic unrest on the 14th and 15th of December 1989. And I am the first generation, full-grown adult that lived in a free and democratic Romania. And that's a game changer for me and my generation.
I'll steal the microphone again because we forgot to mention that we also want to say hello to our friends who see this on the live stream. The live stream is here. Also, for later on, you can watch it. At the moment, it's on wienerzeitung.at/Globsec. Just welcome everybody who's watching us online. So, with that word here.
Cool. Hi, and thank you to everyone for coming, and thank you for inviting me to this GlobSec panel. My name is Francis Rafal, and I am the curator of the Global Shapers Vienna Hub. And I'm also an entrepreneur active in the field of tech, education, and film. And the question was, why am I here, right? So yeah, it's about millennials and democracy. I am obviously a millennial. I wasn't even born when the Velvet Revolution took place. So in 1989, I didn't experience anything from this Velvet Revolution. But like, my parents came from the Philippines, and I was born in Vienna. And being born in Vienna as a migrant, I really won the lottery, because this is a country where I could pursue my passion, pursue free education, pursue whatever crazy ideas I had in mind, express free thoughts, whereas I have so many relatives in the Philippines that can't do the same. So being born into a liberal democracy actually really gave me a lot of opportunities that I'm very thankful for. So now I'm just kind of concerned about, okay, where are we heading with democracy in terms of challenging questions? For example, AI, the technological disruption through genetic manipulation on humans that could create a new species, and in facing the threat of climate change. So I'm very curious to find out what can we do with democracy to further develop better solutions to these issues right now.
Thank you very much. Please. You have one. That's great.
Yes, we got one. Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Natalia Kiskova. I think there were a lot of thanks given, so thank you. I'm going to add one just for having me. To be frank, I don't really know why I'm here. I think, thank you, Barbara, though, for thinking of me. I'm not very politically active. However, my dad is the president of Slovakia for the next 2 weeks. My partner is one of the founding partners of NEOS, one of the political parties here in Vienna. So I have a lot of politicians around me, but I try to stay away from it. But of course, I live here every day, and I run businesses around, so I have an opinion about democracy. I have an opinion about what's going on, but listening to the three to my left, I know that they have a lot more to say about what's happening in the world. But I'm very thankful to be here, especially that I never know when I'm gonna pop this baby, and also I'm just glad that I can still pop it into democracy. So I'm very happy to be here.
I cannot top that. My name is Mohamed Biciuric. My parents flew from the Bosnian War to Vienna, and I also got the lottery the lottery of born. So quite happy to be in Vienna. I'm a student of political science and history. I'm editor of the digital magazine Kopf und Krone. Maybe someone knows it. It's about conducting talks with personalities all across Europe. And I've wrote with the former Vice Chancellor Erhard Bussek a book, and talking especially on these issues, how the future of democracy. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion. I think I will participate with a more realistic view on it,
Okay, I'm already enjoying this. Yeah, we had European Union elections. Maybe that's a good way to start to get the discussion going. And the results were, some of them I think were to be expected. Some of them were surprising. And Alex, maybe if you want to give us your view of what happened yesterday, Sunday, election day, and now we are, of course, chewing over the results. What's your take on it?
Happy to start. It happens often that I'm the first in line. I look at the numbers last evening, also as the votes were coming in, also in Romania, which was a very enthusiastic exercise. And I see the EP elections with both a happy eye and a not so happy eye. The happy eye is the fact that we are at over 50% turnout, and that's way more than the past 25 years. In some countries was even above 55%. So that's the strong signal that the pro-European sentiment exists, and especially in CEE region, where we somehow had some fears that extremist parties would take over more seats than actually they did. On the other hand, I'm looking at it also with caution. We should not neglect the fact that the far-right parties still have won in Italy, and in France, and in Poland, and in Hungary. And while they were not first in other countries, they still scored quite high. I was crunching some numbers, and I think that altogether, the factions are having around 230 seats in the EP. The mainstream parties have also lowered their influence, and I think that both EPP and the Socialists together have lost around 80 to 90 seats, and they are distributed to, surprisingly, the Greens and also to the Liberals. I think that the Liberals, all in all, have around 100 seats in the new outlook. What that means is there are new majorities and new alliances to be forged on different political agendas. The mainstream parties need to look at who their electorate is and what are they offering to this electorate. And we should still keep an eye on the far-right parties, because that wave is far from being over. However, I think that this round of EP elections has increased or awoken the pro-European sentiment across the board in the entire Europe. And it's also higher than the midterms in the US in terms of voter turnout. So we should look at the positives and build on them, but we should not neglect also the strong signals on the other side of the road.
And as our discussion is on millennials, the figures that I saw, especially I focused on Germany, of course, on my own country, Austria also, but a lot of other countries, the millennials generation and the younger ones tend to be further to the left than the general electorate, and very green in some countries. Germany is a perfect example, but also in Austria, for instance, the Greens did very well in these in these countries, and in a lot of other countries too. And just maybe one last question. You think, is it about climate change mainly? Is that something that you think that young people are nowadays focusing on?
I don't think it's only climate change, it's sustainability in general, and there are global issues that we care more. And indeed, across Europe, you see a younger, urban, preoccupied generation with other topics that are not divided only on economic lines, but they are civically engaged, they care about global issues, they are more tolerant, they are more open, they traveled abroad, and they are willing to get involved in topics or challenging the status quo. So I don't think that that's something that we should be surprised. I think that that's a wave that will continue, also with the newer generations coming in to vote.
And Francis just said that he likes it and he loves it to be in Vienna, and he has a Filipino background, and also Vienna, of course, is great. And the Philippines is, of course, when we talk about democracy, one of those countries of concern, let's say, with Duterte being in charge. He's one of those, like Bolsonaro in Brazil, where we have these international trends of, let's say, illiberal democracy. And why do you think there is a certain countries, both within Europe and both, of course, like countries like Brazil, like Philippines, where we see that trend? Do you have any ideas about that?
2 years ago, I asked myself exactly this question, and I went to the Philippines because I wanted to explore my roots a little bit further. And there are some things that I discovered. First of all, who do we care about as humans? Mostly we care about our immediate surroundings, about our family, about our friends, and then only later maybe about our community, and then later about the whole nation. In Austria, a lot of people think about, okay, what is good for the nation? This is what nationalism is actually about. It's not particularly a bad or a good thing, but people actually think about what is good for the country and not only think about themselves. In the Philippines, it's kind of different. People mostly think about, at least the people that I've talked to, mostly think about what does this politician bring to my immediate surroundings. And there is one particular value in the Philippines which is called utang ng loob, which means lifelong debt. So if you help someone and do something, for example, help someone to get into another country or pay for the education for someone, this person owes you for their entire life, and you can never repay this debt. And I've actually only experienced this in my own family, but then when I went to the Philippines, I realized, wow, this is something that is really, the whole society is built on one of these values. And if a politician says, hey, vote for me, then people will always ask the question, what will this bring for me individually? And if I vote for you, what can you do for me? So this is, I think, something that very much fuels corruption and doesn't fuel a very broad sense of, okay, what can we do for the country, but what can we do for ourselves? And I think one reason for that is because at least a quarter of the Filipinos still have troubles putting food on their table. So they really just care about getting something to eat, have shelter, and it's very, very hard to introduce a liberal democracy into a country where people struggle with the most basic needs. So this was one insight that I learned from the Philippines.
Maybe, there we go. Natalia, you've been quite humble saying, well, I'm not political. I don't believe that, by the way. Because maybe the question is what means being a political person, being a political citizen. And already what you said, it's very much about community. Maybe, and I was asking myself when I was preparing for this panel, what are the elements of democracy? Of course, it's institutions. We know that. It's rule of law. It's elections. I mean, of course, that's the ritual of democracy that we all focus on. But there seems to be some, let's say, let me call it the hardware of democracy, the structures. But the software is actually within ourselves, isn't it? And people who create communities and create space for people to express themselves, I believe it's part of this, of what we call democracy. So maybe because you have been so humble, and I think what you brought up is maybe even bring a new life to the world is maybe also a political act, because yeah, you decide, yes, you're an optimist, otherwise you wouldn't do that, right? So maybe
Egoist could be also.
Egoist, okay. Well, I don't have kids, so I think I always thought I'm the egoist because I did decide not to bring life in the world. But we can talk about that also. But maybe if you want to reflect on this, what community means, that this more the software of it, because you avoid to say, well, I'm not such a political person. And again, I don't believe it, because the way we think about politics is maybe a bit too narrow if we just focus on these, institutions, media, elections, and all that.
I like that you named all of them, because I couldn't name what democracy. I was Googling it before, what stands for. But I think where you are right, it is. I'm not being humble. I just really don't know much. Community for me, from my business perspective. So I've been working in educational sector or co-working, something like Impact Hub, but on a global scale, starting from Slovakia, and we were doing free education for startups, community, and actually expanding it to younger and older people. And one of the topics we wanted to cover is if we want to have political discussions, or if we want to become more community involved, if we want to do that. And one of the decisions was yes, but very limited. We want to invite politicians to come and talk, but only if they talk for themselves and not for the party that they represent. I don't know how many politicians you know who can do that. I don't know any, because everyone is then representing a certain idea. It's very hard to get even my father or my boyfriend to come and talk about their own beliefs rather than the beliefs of the party they're representing. So I think for me, what we try to do is create a community from a perspective of let's meet people who care about that. I think one of the things Francis was saying, that you have to care about the bigger goal. I don't believe in it. I think you need to be selfish first, and you need to fulfill yourself to be happy, because only then can you fulfill other goals. Slovaks have been oppressed a lot, And actually, we are very selfless, and we always care. Like, yes, a lot of people can say we're selfish, but I would say no. We stand in lines. We follow order. We do whatever everyone tells us. That's what Slovaks are. And I think we need to be selfish at the beginning in order to create a good community, a community of change. And I think that's what's coming with millennials, is people are doing self-development, they're caring about themselves, and then they start caring about community. That's where we see all these new parties coming up, all these amazing young people who are in Globsec organizing things for Slovakia to get a different kind of perspective, but it cannot start from I just want to, give my life to the world. I first need to care about myself, then I can care about my country. And it's a new trend, which I find really funny. It's to be the cool hipster, you need to be politically involved now. I really found it out. Or natural wine, you decide which one. But I think it's a great trend because these people started caring about themselves, they're healthy, they have healthy relationships, they care about their mental health, and now they're caring about community. And I love that, and I think those are the people that are here, and then, now we are also contributing with business and startups, and this is creating a really nice flow.
Yes, and I think one of the problems might be that the structure, the hardware, is still there. It's the party state. Everything is basically based on the party. Parties, then you get elected, be an MP or an MEP or something. This is the base of our party democracies. But what you're talking about is much broader than that, in a sense. What I understand is, okay, let's say movements, or let's say even fluid structures where, yes, I'm caring about this issue, I'm caring about that issue. Of course, they're somehow related, but that I don't want to commit to the Social Democrats or the Greens or the Liberals or the Conservatives because, yes, I have different ideas. And so how you think we can bring this party state of the 20th century into the 21st, we have these more fluid structures where we have people who are more open-minded in the sense that say, well, yes, I might not share your view on this issue, but still we can be great friends, politically even, because, yeah, I pretty much think that your value system is okay, even if I don't share it, but yes, we have the same values in a sense, even if we're on different sides of the ideological divide. How can we get there? Do you see any?
I think it's already happening. I don't think there is a path. I think it's here in Austria slowly happening with what's happening today. It happened in Slovakia. It had to be a murder in order to happen, but it is happening that we are getting startup political parties. There are, Progresívne Slovensko, Spolu, My Dad's Future, whatever it's going to be. There are startups that are creating something where you can associate with not maybe 100%, but 60 to 80%, but you just know that those people are good. They don't want to steal. They just want to do something that is meaningful, and they do it because they care. And I think this is what's the changing from my perspective from millennials. It's no longer about, I need the status, I need the pride. It's more of a, I want to change something and create a positive change. And I think that's fluidly happening, and that's, maybe Kurz is a millennial, I think even, and he's not the best example of doing that, I think. But in many opinions, in Progresívne Slovensko, there are many young people who are doing it differently. Maybe you can talk about Kurz a bit more.
Well, we can do that also later on. But also, I'm the only, the FP would say, autochthon Austrian. And then I'm in this crowd of people. And what I always see is that, okay, if you come from Central Eastern Europe, and this relates to our topic of 1989, you understand that history matters, that politics matters. If you have maybe a background that is not, that you have a family background somewhere else, that also you see that, okay, this is not your God's given right, that Austria is basically on the top of the list when it comes to, all these quality of life standards and all these indicators and so on. And of course, Vienna is always on top of the list of, most livable city and God knows what. And that, I think that maybe sometimes we miss something that maybe my panel gets much better than me. For instance, when I think of Bosnia or Central Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe, sorry, I reported on Kosovo in '99. I was in Bosnia a lot, in Srebrenica, and it was in the bombing campaign in '99 of Belgrade and all that. And it's a very difficult, tangled history, with a lot of blood being spilled, and maybe you want to talk about that. what we take for granted of people who've been born and raised in Vienna, it's not God's given. It's not something that you can say, well, this is how life is because just came back from Syria, and also of course, yeah, it's a first-hand look of that peace is not a natural thing. You have to struggle for it. So I'm wondering, you think your heritage that did play a role, that you became a political mind, that you became a political person, and also do you think that you maybe have some understanding of history that maybe we have to learn about, that is somehow in your DNA in a sense, that is somehow you get it, because if you just maybe go visit, family and friends, yeah, it's still very much alive. Of course, much more so than in Vienna, which is, the last thing we experienced, ended in '45, fortunately. So, what you think that makes a difference?
A little bit, because I'm aware of where I came from, and I know how it is in Bosnia, where you have about nothing, and where my parents grew up, and living in Vienna, like going into the inner city of the first district. It's quite impressive, as well as for me who is raised up here. But the difference between Austria and this region, it has to do a lot with mentality, because if you wanna solve things in Bosnia, you take your phone and if you have the contact for it, you will solve any problem as long as you know someone. This is not functioning in Austria. We have quite an interesting mentality about law and order and sticking to it. In Bosnia, you don't have it like that, and the bigger part is quite of institutions. Because Austria was, in history, differentiated in many ethnical groups, like about more even than 10, the emperor needed strong institutions to rule through these ethnical groups. And there the problem with the Balkans is they were always and part of an imperial imperial state, but never be on their own. So they have to learn a lot about it, but I'm not sure if something will happen there. I see the younger generation is quite, because of social media and other stuff, they know how better the life is in Western Europe, so they call, look, I don't want to change anything. I pack my stuff, study here, and go to Western Europe. God damn it with these whole politicians. I'm done here. I go to make something better otherwhere. So they have a huge brain drain and declining population.
Yes, absolutely. That's something that I think Orban is very happy about, that 800,000 of the young and bright Hungarians left, yeah. So there is no unemployment. But of course, yeah, I mean that's what he always says. Yeah. But of course, there's other problems. But I think you raised an interesting point about, and I'm sure that it's an interesting topic for our topic, our general topic here. There is democracy. It's about institutions, right? And it's about the people. So let's say you can be a Republican or a Democrat, but this not in the United States sense. I mean it in the kind of the more institutional, believer in the republic, or the Democrat who believes in the power of the people, the street, and so on. And I found out that from my inclination, I'm more the Democrat, and I used to be more the Democrat. But as time progressed, in let's say the more critical times we got into, I became more of a Republican, because suddenly Trump, and I found out, okay, the Supreme Court is quite good that there is one. And it's quite good there is, the capital, and there's the Senate, and there's elections, the midterms, and suddenly there is some people who can actually rein in the President of the United States. So I found out, okay, maybe should I change my mind and become more of a Republican, not in the US sense, I should stress that, but in the sense that, okay, institutions are really, really important. So what do you think? I mean,
I think that's the biggest thing, or the most important thing in a state. How strong the institutions are, because if I imagine it like in Austria, if we wouldn't have the institutions strong like this, and these laws are quite older than 100 years, the institution laws, there is a huge potential that the FPÖ would wipe it out. And there in Turkey it happened. In Eastern Europe it happens all the time. These strong institutions are quite the anchor of democracy. And then not just only the state institutions, but as well the civil society, the free market, as well as the free press. These are all institution parts, and I think without them, you can easily destroy democracy to a huge extent. Yeah.
And maybe I switch over and I'll give the microphone to Alex. And okay, one thing is institutions versus the power of the people. And again, going back to '89, if you have a need for change, it's the power of the people. It's usually not the institutions say, well, you know, we looked it up in the constitution, and we found out. And by the way, some of the Eastern European countries had pretty constitutions, and also the constitution of the People's Republic of China is pretty nice and neat. But of course, it's on paper, and therefore you needed, people's power to change the situation, or the Maidan in Ukraine, or the Velvet Revolution, of course, in '89, and the fall of the Berlin Wall. It was people power. So how important is that? We talked about we need institutions so that democracy can survive under stress, and we need strong institutions so that it can work and that we have rule of law, etc. But on the other hand, how can we change things if things don't work? And actually, I'm not a person who says, well, we want a revolution, because that always can end in tears. But we talked about this, that maybe this corset or this our suit of democracy doesn't fit us anymore. A lot of people are not happy with the things, also with the institutional framework. So we need to change it, but we don't want to tear it up, right? So how can we deal with that? Where do you see a chance for changing it while not, throwing out the baby with the bathwater?
There is one thing that I'm always quite puzzled: the fact that we separate institutions and people. And I don't think that that's the dichotomy that we should start. You don't have institutions without people, and people, through their representatives, are building institutions. So I don't see one without the other, and I think that it's a wrong premise to say we need to choose either the institutions or we need to choose the people. The second point I want to make also on identity and institutions. As I mentioned, I lived in a period of Romania that was building. It was a democratic transition, but was without conflict, without the so-called securitate, the secret service, with less distress and poverty. However, I chose to work in a field that brought me to conflict and post-conflict areas. I served with the EU in Georgia. I was after that in Ukraine. I've been in other parts of the world, and I saw what it means to be in a country where there are no institutions, and where there are no people who want to build institutions, because it's in their favor not to have functioning institutions. So I don't think that we need to choose. I think that we need to have strong systems of checks and balances in place. So we have the means, the democratic means, through either direct elections or through our representatives in parliament, in local elections, to change what we feel is not fitting us any longer. It's not an exercise of just putting it all into the garbage bin and starting from scratch. We don't reinvent the wheel. Democracy is not a perfect system, but we don't have anything better, at least for the time being. However, it's a perfectible system, and it's down to us and our political elites and all those that get involved, either with NGOs, with media, as directors, as artists, as scholars, to find the ways of adjusting the institutions. And yes, we are living challenging times, but as I was talking offline with some of the co-panelists before, we are not the only ones. I don't think that we are the only generation that goes through systemic change. In the big arch of history, we are just a very small point. The systemic change has happened every time there was a macro revolution of a type of another, be that industrial. Now it's the technological era. So we are just facing with very different times where our institutions and our system needs to adjust. I don't think that we need to be stuck, but we should not just let it all go or start from scratch, because we don't have anything better. And it's about the people, not about the institutions and the people that are in the institutions.
I agree with you that I think that is a very important point, and great that you brought it up, that we are in, I think, an era of massive change, because not only, you mentioned the information revolution, which is probably Gutenberg on steroids, what we see here, but also I think the energy transition. I mean, just coming back from the Middle Eastern region, from northern Iraq and Syria, I think we're phasing out of oil. I mean, we're not far into it, but I think Sheikh Saki Yamani, OPEC General Secretary in the 70s, once said, the Stone Age didn't end because of a lack of stones. So we are into this, and especially in countries like Austria and Germany and others, I think a lot of people think of that's what's coming. And that means two huge, complete, transformations that are massive. I mean, the information revolution, but also I think this shift in the energy infrastructure and energy system will also be massive. And again, coming back to the question of how do we get also going back to millennials. Do you think that the politics of today addresses the issues? Because I think, I was a generation of a youth bulge in the 90s, and we were quite, making ourselves heard, and we had it much better in many ways, because if I'd be young today, I would not be able to buy the flat that I'm living in today, because it's just in the time where since I stay there, it has been doubled in price, which is horrible. And then, I just probably have to ask in the audience, we will, by the way, do that right now, later. There is so many problems that young people have, and that I think, okay, is that, can you make yourself heard in our political system? Is the party state actually listening? Because that's also something, I don't hear that much about, we hear a lot about pensions, and we know that that's an issue as well, of course, but what about, really young people? What about adequate pay for jobs? We have highly qualified workforce today, and I think a lot of young people experience that the salary is not really adequate. We have a really horrendous rents in many of European cities, and what do young people do? And do you think that there is a problem here?
Well, you put the entire spectrum of problems of the millennial generation on my shoulders, and I'm not sure that I can give an answer to all of those, but I would like to make a few points. No, I don't think that the entire political spectrum responds to our current needs and views of the world. And that's a fact. However, there are parts of the political spectrum, political representatives in a form or another, that understand they're either part of the newer, younger generations, and they understand they have the same needs and interests, or they are the ones that adjust because they know that their political future cannot function in the old mindset. Second point is that to be politically involved, you don't necessarily need, in my view, to be part of a party. Being civically involved can be done from multiple means. Social media as the newest. You can be active in a non-governmental organization. You can have your community networks, so on and so forth, and you can still have political power. So you don't necessarily have to sign up as a member of a political party. And that's a shift, again, in what do we understand to being through being politically involved. Third, on renewables, just to take them one by one, I think that the biggest commodity is data these days. Yes, we talk about oil, we talk about reserves, we talk about sustainability. In the end, I think that we are living an accelerated life enhanced by technology, and data is the most important commodity that we currently trade, and that's what defines us, at least as new generation. So the wealth or the distribution of wealth or unequal distribution of wealth will be very much linked to data and the way we work with big data these days, and we manage to factor it into our policies and in our day-to-day life. And to end with the unemployment, partial employment, retirement, well, I don't really think that I'm gonna be able to retire. Like, just honestly, thinking long-term, I'm 30. Average age for retiring in Europe is, what, 67, 65, 67. Well, in 37 years, like, I still have 37 years to work first, and then in 37 years, God knows what I'm gonna do. Probably I hope I can open a bar on a beach in Costa Rica and just live my retirement in peace and enjoying it, still producing to the local or helping the local economy, still have some income for myself. So it is changing. There is a lot of uncertainty. Education and the fact that you have a master's degree or even a PhD does not guarantee that you will have a certain standard of living or the immediately after graduation, you will go, you'll find a super cool job, and you will be highly paid, and you'll be able to buy your apartment. I've studied in the US. My colleagues graduated with probably on average 150K debt. Did they all get a job immediately after graduation? No, but they were all eventually able to find a decent job and start building on their also economic perspective and future. So yes, we do have a shift. You have a lot of freelancers. You have different ways of engaging both politically and economically. And I don't think that we should stuck to just having the 9-to-5 regular employment contract and pension fund and retirement. It's not business as usual any longer, and it should not be for us. We are the most probably flexible generation that I know of, so we should embrace that.
Okay. Before I go on to France, I will ask you a question related to my question to the audience, or who of you has seen the video of Heinz Christian Strache? Pretty much everyone, yes. And that also brought me to the, I had the feeling that maybe there is a recruitment problem in politics, that for some reason the character traits of people who go into politics, who want to be in politics, are maybe in a way that there is a certain recruitment pattern that of people who go into politics which is maybe unhealthy. We can talk about that also. You might be interested in that topic. And I think there is a problem. And I'm not saying there is idealists for sure, 100%, but obviously there is a problem here. And so I'm wondering, maybe it's a problem that somehow the political process has been muddied so much and been tainted so much that a lot of decent people just choose to stay out. So my question to Francis now, after this long introduction, is what would happen for you to go into politics? What would I need to offer you? What would need to happen where you think, okay, I need to be in there, I need to get involved, I need to run for Chancellor of Austria, of course, maybe joining a party or founding one or whatever. What would it take for you to say, listen, guys, you all do that wrong. It needs me. I need to be there. I need to get involved.
I wouldn't want to go into politics because I believe that the problem is with the system of having politicians itself. That's one main flaw in democracy. So right now we have like two types of democracy, representative democracy and direct democracy. The problem with representative democracy is that we elect people that vote on our behalf, but the problem is every human is so complex that you can never have one representative represent exactly what you would choose for in every question. So in direct democracy, we could say, okay, let's let all the people vote on every question. The problem with that is, a lot of people say the problem is we don't communicate enough, we don't educate people enough. That's not the problem. The problem is what Cesar Hilgado from MIT says, it's a cognitive bandwidth problem. So last year in Austria, we passed 100 laws, federal laws. It's like 2 laws per week. And when we say, okay, we need around 10,000 hours to become an expert in something, that means like every week I would need to spend 20,000 hours to become an expert to actually answer this question in a fashion that is good, that I can make an educated answer. And not even like I can do it, and I don't think that a lot of politicians can do it, and I don't blame them. It's mostly because it's a cognitive bandwidth problem. So there are other forms like liquid democracy where we can say, okay, I'm going to cast my vote to a representative, but I can also like withdraw it during the terms and give it to someone else. But that's the same problem. It's a cognitive bandwidth problem. So now let's see what we have right now. We have some technological disruptions coming, and one example for that is artificial intelligence. Some people might say, okay, maybe an AI could vote better for all of us. One centralized AI could know better what's good for all of us. But the problem with that is that's very, 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 very dangerous to have one central AI to decide for the entire humanity what is good. So this MIT professor, Cesar Hilgado, made one idea popular where he said, let's combine direct democracy with artificial intelligence. And the basic idea is like this. Netflix knows exactly what I want to watch. Social media knows exactly what I want to read. And Spotify knows exactly what I want to listen to. So what if we would create AI agents, software agents, that I would train that would represent only my own opinion on every different matter. So imagine, for example, in Austrian Parliament, instead of 183 representatives, we would have 8.8 million representatives, but all of them would vote directly on every law that's being passed every week. So I don't believe that I would be a good politician, because I believe the problem is that we elect people who have a cognitive bandwidth problem. So I really believe that we should find ways to leverage the new technology that we have, conduct experiments, try to research them on a small scale, and try to find out how we can leverage this to find better solutions.
As a person who studied biology, I want to speak up for humanity now, because we're definitely where the human brain, I think, is better than AI is when it comes to moral questions, because that is a very complicated process where our prefrontal cortex is pretty good at doing that. AI is, the Germans figured out a little bit with autonomous driving, but from my knowledge, I think it's the toughest thing to do in AI. To kind of, when you have moral questions, we all know the problem. We have an autonomous car. When is it time for you to die and crash into the wall, and when is it time to run over somebody else? I mean, that is basically, and this reasoning really gets computers crazy. But in any case, I think it's a very fascinating idea. We have each of us has an agent. We send them to deliberate on things, and maybe come back to us and ask us again. I'm not discounting the idea at all. I think it's pretty interesting. But I'm saying I think there is a moral reasoning problem that computers will not solve anytime soon. But also, I want to address the audience and ask you guys, who of you thinks that you would be a politician, and you think that it's time for people like you to get into it, to say, listen, I'm fed up with you guys, I'm gonna do it myself. Is there anybody here who would do that? Oh, good. Yes, great. More people raising their hand. I will just pass the microphone here. Whoever wants to grab it first, please. Ladies first, maybe. Please. There you go. No. It's now it's your time, please. Your soapbox.
Oh my God. Well, I think that's about a personality, and we should. For me, if I should think of how can I be more useful for the community I live in, I probably should be somehow more active in way. And I also agree with the fact that I'm an AI geek and so on, but actually I'm not sure whether this would be, as you said, regarding the moral things. I think we should just combine it somehow, and the people should be still active in the debate.
Hi, I'm Lawrence Kettle. I'm with the Austrian Institute for European and Security Policy. The reason why I raised my hand was, before a certain period of time, I'd never really considered it as well. In fact, I seem to remember a time when my own father said, oh, don't waste your time, it's full of corrupt know-it-alls who ironically don't know anything. But as you can tell by my accent, what I'm probably going to say is there is one certain event that has made me way more politically active, and that is Brexit. Because not only is it a gigantic mess, that actually encouraged me to finally nail my colours to a mast. I joined a political party. I joined the Liberal Democrats because I thought, yeah, these guys have been consistent with their message. And it is something that I am considering is going into the political sphere because of the sheer disaster that Brexit is. And as a person like myself who counts themselves as a British European living in Austria, there is a real danger of my rights, as well as the 10,500 other British citizens who live here, having our rights ripped away from us, all because of a minority decision. So, and it's not just me, but it's also other millennials and Gen Z and the future generations that come after Gen Z. It's like, these are people who are having their and Europeans living in Britain. This is people who are having their opportunities ripped away from them potentially. I mean, there's a lot of potential possibility that Brexit could be cancelled, so touch wood. Yeah, fingers crossed. But yeah, that's what really did it for me. It was like, no, you've crossed a line. Now we're, yeah. It's on.
That's exactly what I was asking. So great illustration of that. There is a point. Obviously, there are red lines where people get engaged. You know, was it in the civil rights movement or with Brexit? Things big or small, that happens. And I have another point I want to throw out. Just maybe also my panelists, the audience. Also, I have the feeling, again, speaking as a guy who studied biology, that the XY chromosome might also play a part, because all the rituals in politics somehow are, and talk about Brexit, by the way, or Australian debates in Australian Parliament, there's some toxic masculinity involved. I mean, I have the feeling also that there is a problem here. It's about the alpha male, it's about the gorilla. It's either, there's two models, I think. Either the gorilla, alpha male, or the Mose, I lead you to whatever happiness and hope and so on. So also that is something I think that is worth reflecting, and I want to throw that out as well. Maybe that the political rituals also keep people from going into it, because you want a reasonable debate, all you're getting is people shouting at each other. I'm wondering that if that keeps sane people away from the business somehow. But also I think you raised your hand as well.
Yeah, I'm actually a vice president of a political youth, and I went there just because earlier at school I also was representative, and the main reason is I see my life as I want to give it as serving the others. So that's actually I'm strongly believing Christian, and I see my purpose to be here to serve the others and to serve the common good. And why actually you joined the Liberal Democrats, I'm actually in the Christian Democrats, so the APP, and I see that as the best way to serve the others, in the way to bring common good into the society and the involvement of our society.
And do you think that also panelists, audience, what is there, the left-right divide still an issue, or let's call it progressive, conservative, whatever you want to call it, or is it other things? I mean, how is this coordinate system? I'm asking myself also, is that still relevant to millennials, or are we somewhere where this coordinate system of like left and right is maybe no longer that relevant? Maybe other factors are more important. Can you just... Yes, please wait for the microphone for the benefit of our audience watching on YouTube.
My name is Wicca, I'm from the Netherlands. To answer your question whether this conservative, progressive divide is still relevant, I think it's very much relevant. If you play advocate for the devil for a moment, you said that youth nowadays is more likely to vote green and to vote for progressives. Well, if you go to Eastern Poland, if you go to Banská Bystrica in the center of Slovakia, you find that youth is not voting green or progressives, but you find that they are voting exactly the opposite. They are voting Ruch Narodowy, the national way, or they are voting Kotleba's People's Party. And when you ask them why they do it, they say because we don't want liberalism from the West. So I think in that sense, yes, it's very relevant. Left, right, maybe less, but I think conservative, progressive is definitely still there. And I would also like to ask the panelists how you would explain this kind of gap emerging among youth, especially, because you can say it's a generational conflict like Brexit with the pensions, but among youth is the same divide. So whether you have an answer for that.
Great. Before we trying to, all of us maybe wrap our heads around these questions, let me throw out one more to all of us here, and that is when we talked also the last, especially the last 12, maybe 18 months about democratic recession, kind of a retreat of democracy, at least in the Western world. And I'm asking myself, where are we? If that is a curve, let's say, are we at a turning point? Are we going back to a trend towards democratic renaissance? Are we still on a slippery slope, going downhill fast? Or where are we? Or is there a soft landing? Is there a turning point? Do you see, some green sprouts maybe somewhere? I'm just interested in what is your mood when it comes to that. Is it black out there? Maybe you don't. If I watch The Handmaid's Tale, I think, okay, this is really happening somehow. Or is there light at the end of the tunnel finally? Where are we? Anybody has an idea about that?
Maybe I'll give it a try. I don't know exactly where we are with democracy right now. Looking at the EU elections, voter turnout increased, which is great, but I really believe that nobody of the acting parties right now really understands the disruption that's going to come. Automation will really reduce the amount of jobs that are there. Like all the fighting around migrants or whatever, that all doesn't matter. It's not migrants will take our jobs, but machines will take our jobs. And I'm really happy about that, because there are so many jobs. I think, how many people are really happy with their jobs? Not a lot of people. I don't know the statistics exactly, but more than half of people, at least more than half of people, are not happy with their jobs because they're just being created to have these jobs. And I'm so happy that we finally will be able to get to a stage where we as humanity, as Homo sapiens, created something that could actually replace the manual and also cognitive work that we have to do to just be efficient and try to function in this economical system. And after that, we will have several challenges. First, a huge class of people that will be useless. And these people will struggle really, really hard with their lives because first they don't know first how to put food on their table, but even if they got some money, some kind of universal basic income, they don't know how to put worth to their life. Their entire life they were raised to put worth to their own person based on their work, right? So this is one huge issue, and I don't know where we are with democracy right now, but I believe that democracy is too slow to really tackle these issues. And I've read through all the election programs of all parties, at least in Austria, and no single party really addressed the problem. They just don't see it, and that's one huge issue that I see.
I would totally disagree. The difference between a historian and a social scientist is that a historian never believes any prognosis, because in history it happens that you're a skeptical optimist, but you are aware of it that anything can glide into catastrophes. And most of social sciences or economic prognosis were wrong through the centuries. It just happens. So I would be a little bit skeptical if automatization will erase the most of the jobs. Let's see what happens in the end. But in terms of democracy, I think the problem with democracy in the you can participate like never in history before. It's the truth. But the problem is the youth doesn't want it. I see the young colleagues writing on Facebook, yeah, it's easy, but please dedicate your life for your thing you want to approach. Oh no, I want to go two or three times to vacation. I need a better paid job. I don't want to work 40 hours in a week. That's not enough for change. And the big changers in history were always these people which dedicated to life to certain things. And this doesn't happen anymore. And the interesting thing about this younger generation is, in millennials, they want to be morally right. Everyone wants to clap on the shoulders. Yeah, nice. I know, Fridays for Future and other things. But nobody of them asks seeking power. And if you want to change something, you need power. And this somehow conservatives learned. I criticize Kurz for a lot of things, but he knows what is necessary to be done for changing the things, and he does it great.
And just to add one thing, which is interesting to look it up. You can Google it as a PDF out there. John Maynard Keynes, the famous economist, wrote an essay called The Economic Perspectives of the Grandchildren, because he thought he could actually go to the beach, because he saw, that time not computers, but let's say the first robots or machines coming up, productivity really skyrocketed, and he thought the result would be that we all would work 3 hours and then go to the beach. So I think you have something here unfortunately I would love to go to the beach more often actually, and it's not happening, I'm sure, also for most people here. But on the other hand, history doesn't repeat itself. It rhymes maybe, but it doesn't repeat itself. So just because in the past it was like that, it doesn't mean that every disruptive technologies might be really disruptive. Yeah. So let's wait and see. But I think it's a very interesting debate that you brought up. I think your question, was it answered really? Yeah. So the question of power, obviously, without power you can't change anything.
I think I wrote a bunch of things. There were so many questions you asked. I don't know how people follow, but I had to write them down, so I'm sorry I'm not texting. I would just like to start with you, Francis, when you said, you wish there would be a centralized AI, because Spotify, but I mean, there's like that, Spotify knows what I want to listen to, Netflix, what I want to watch, where I still get enlarge my penis ads, so I don't know if you get them. I don't want that to vote for me. I love technology, but there's still a lot of progress that needs to happen there, so just wanted to add that. Then towards you, Lawrence, you were saying, like how you joined in now because there's something that happened. My dad said he would never become a politician, ever. I say that daily. And I'm seeing how much I've changed in the past 10 years. I'm seeing what's changing with the culture. So I think a lot of us who haven't raised our hands here might become politicians very soon, because it might have to be the thing we have to do in order to prosper, progress, make our children happy. So I think, I always had this idea of I have to get rich first, and then I can start an NGO, and then I can change the world. And that was the progress. I think that's in a lot of people's minds, that if you have the money, you can change the world. So I think I'm power oriented. Is that power? But now I'm seeing that a lot of people like you want to start early, and they see that they can do change without being rich or without that power. And I think this is what's changing, and this is what democracy is bringing, that you don't have to do that. You don't have to be an oligarch in order to make change. So I think that was another point. Woo. And the last one was for you about, I don't know what they're called them. I would call them the Nazi party, but in Slovakia that was now also elected to European Parliament. One of the things that a lot of young people say, there's too much information. They don't know how to sieve through what the parties are thinking. I don't know if you guys ever read a political party agenda. I never did that because it's so long and there's so much, and no one's is direct. You listen to discussions, even to us 4 or 5, and you don't know what our opinion is, because we just blah blah blah, but we don't say, hey, I want to do this, I'm gonna do this. It's not clear. And with Facebook, Instagram, whatever, AI, we have so much information, and the young people are overwhelmed with information. They cannot make a decision. And voting something super like Trump, it's easy. I know what he stands for. You exactly know. Everyone can say the 5 things Trump stands for. Can you tell what Kurz stands for? Yeah, pretty much. He's pretty clear about it. Can you say about the other parties, the green parties, the Neos of the world, what they stand for? Sometimes they're slightly LGBT friendly. Sometimes they are pro-abortion, against abortion. It's very hard to distinguish what they stand for, and that's why young people are choosing from that information something that's easy. Something that's easy to follow. And I wish there would be more parties that you can just say, hey, okay, well, 90% of the time you're kind of like me, so great, it's easy, but it's not there. And I think that's why young people are choosing something easy.
Very, very important points, I think. Number one, in the clarity of the message, build the wall, lock her up, etc., as you said, with what Trump did. That works, obviously. And the other thing, and that came up also, democracy slowing things down. that's the procedure. Like we're having an election in Austria, and it has to be 88 days because all the procedures, to get the register right, etc., etc. So democracy intentionally slows things down, whereas we are used to, I'm buying something on Amazon, click, and I have it, right? So I think that is an interesting, what you said, kind of complexity versus simplicity, and the other is what you already brought up, speed. We want instant solutions, and democracy intentionally slows things down because it goes to parliament, then it maybe goes to experts. The expert comments come back, and then it's into law, and then it goes back to, let's say, in Austria would be kind of the constitutional department who looks if everything is constitutional. Then it goes back to the parliament, to the first reading, the second reading, and so on. Intentionally, things are being slowed down, and I think that is also something that would be interesting. Is that important? I mean, do we want this instant, fast decision making, whereas democracy tends to intentionally slow things down so that everybody can have a say, that everything is done the right way, so to speak?
I don't know if you use Instagram, but there's this polling and questions and answer. It's instant, and the instant gratification of millennials is amazing. Like, I love it, and I'm a millennial, and I think, yes, it is not great to not have enough information and make a decision, but I think what happened is we overcomplicated things, and with everything that's happening, you say, now there are 2 regulations coming in every week, people are getting confused. So trying to find a way to use technology to make it easier in government so it doesn't have to go through 6 times, 6 runs, 88 days, but actually having it online very clearly. AI is actually going to pick out for you what you need to know, not to know all the bullshit around it, just actually what is it trying to say, describe it in my language. I think that would help. I think simplicity makes it easier and makes more educated decisions. It doesn't mean that we have to vote through Instagram, but it also means that we need to be more clear, because the old school way of philosophically talking for hours about politics, 90 minutes today, woof, it's a lot of talking, right? It's usually you would sit here for 30 minutes and go because you have other things. My Instagram is blowing, I want to do other stuff. That's how world is now, and we need to adjust in order to keep up, because otherwise we're gonna fall behind.
And I do agree partially with what you say. However, I am a very big supporter of solid checks and balances. And I don't think that reacting through our emotions and through our guts, the first reaction is always the healthiest and the best one. Democracy, I wouldn't say that intentionally slows down anything. I think it was work in progress of centuries, given that the first form of democracy was 6th century BC. So there was a lot of trial and error, and there were lessons learned that were eventually factored into the systems. Some of them were misused, some of them were well placed. So there are some guarantees that not everything that goes up on your Instagram screen is actually the right thing for the majority. So there is something that I learned when I was in the NGO world almost 15 years ago, when we started implementing projects as a micro scale, and we saw that they work. We could generate impact for smaller groups of people. And then we tried to scale it up, and we realized that our impact is not as high. So from 75%, let's say, success rate, we went to 50%. And then we tried to scale it up for the city. And then we realized that our success rate was around 15%, because our model was not scalable, not in the way we projected or we designed it. So instant gratification, I think also Simon Sinek has a very good talk on TEDx talk on this need that feeds into our work and our way of living, that you're 6 months or 7 or 8 months in a position in an institution, and then you go and you resign because you don't see the greater good and the greater impact that you produced in your first year in your job. So how is that working? I do understand that we need to accelerate the processes. I do agree that we need to adjust so it responds better to our needs and interests. However, I totally disagree that we should one, accelerated to a point where you have no control and no reversibility whatsoever, or two, we leave the human-centered approach and we have some algorithms that anyways have by default some biased set of data, because that's how we work, and then once we delegate that, we might not be able to reverse it. So I'm pretty fine sometimes the process is to take longer, but still have a solid checked process in place, rather than have a Brexit referendum done out of an emotional and a gambling moment and lose it all.
You said that we should make messages simpler, right? Or make better simpler so that we can actually understand it. That's the problem. That's what everyone says. It's a communication problem. It's not a communication problem. The world is so complex that not even experts understand everything clearly. We can't say for sure insights about the complex problems that we have. We can say, okay, this is gonna happen in 1 year, or this is gonna happen in 2 years. And it's very hard to extrapolate from small insights to big insights, right? So our human brain is not adapted to deal with such complex problems. I want to dive deeper into this AI thing. Again, I didn't say that we should take a central AI, one AI that votes for all of us. I said to train one AI per person that would function as a democracy, but then you can watch it how it would vote for you, and also implement explanations. So this is one thing that a lot of people research on. How did an AI come to this decision? Because that's one problem, right? We have a black box with AI. We don't know how did it get to this decision. So people are researching on that right now, so that an AI could, after it took a decision, explain to you why it took the decision. And possible explanations could be, okay, this decision would economically mean this, ecologically mean this. This would affect yourself like this, and this would affect your friends and family like this. This would affect people you don't like this, and so on. And then, if you watch this, you can either choose to vote yourself, or, for example, set it to autopilot if it voted good for you in the past weeks or months. Because you said democracy is not perfect, but we can perfect it. I don't believe that we can ever perfect it. There's no such thing like perfectionism. And I was a perfectionist for a long, long time. But I believe that we only need to find a system that's better than the one we have right now. And I believe that we can solve the problem of they are such complex matters by making the things simpler. Because if anyone who says there's a simple solution to things is lying. There is no simple solution to things. We need to find the best complex solutions to the complex problems, and for that we need to solve the cognitive bandwidth problem.
Can I just challenge you on something? I said democracy is not perfect, it's perfectible. That doesn't mean that the final outcome would be a system that is perfect. It means that we are all working in making it better for a bigger group of people. So I don't think that we will ever manage to perfect a system, not even an AI, because preferences also change. So what I listened to 15 years ago, I don't want to listen to that Spotify playlist. What I watched probably 3-4 years ago when I first got my Netflix account, you know, maybe I grew up meanwhile. So training AIs, yes, having them supporting and helping our decision-making process, totally for. However, I do believe in our in the frontal cortex, and say that the human decision, the decision-making power should remain human, enhanced with the support of technology. Be that in the field of elections, or future of war, humans off the loop, in the loop, on the loop, because there are certain decisions that require, as you, Thomas, said, your moral stance and your ethical interpretation of developments. And I don't think that any algorithm, regardless of how complex it is, can replace that. And if your decision is wrong, even as a human being, you cannot always be right, because you don't have 10,000 hours to dedicate for each area of expertise. You are still taking responsibility, and you have the accountability component of your decision making. I don't think that we can erase from the equation the accountability part.
Please.
I'm going to stand up. Jasmina Hodzic, I work in the energy sector here in Vienna. And I want to go back to the question of the Dutch colleague here in front of me, and to Natalia's answer to it. And I wonder whether you're not underestimating things and whether you're not brushing off something that is a very important issue. What I mean is that you say all it takes is to have better communication. All it takes is for NEOS, for the Greens to have a really good PR. And I wonder if that's not a patronizing view as well, because what if these people actually believe it? And I think we do have growing evidence that the parties that are becoming more and more popular these days, people believe it. They don't vote for it because they're ill-informed, because it takes 20,000 hours per week to become an expert. This is a value issue, and so I wonder if we are not being complacent. And then I have another question to Muammer, but maybe also to the rest of the panel. You know, you talk about leaders who are going out and doing it. You're talking that courts went out and did it, and why are not other people doing it? And I want to raise the question, well, what does it mean to make an impact? Because we just saw a German YouTuber who made a video and got 5 million views. Is that probably, I want to ask you, is that maybe more impactful than spending 20 years trying to raise through the power ranks of a political party just to then engage in backstabbing? Like, what does it mean to make an impact? And is there a way, like, can we maybe make more of an impact by going to Fridays for Future or by becoming influencers rather than joining these convoluted party structures that then end up kind of being a repetition to the system? Thank you.
I think, thank you.
Sorry, maybe to follow up on that, my Slovak flatmate, he told me that he wouldn't tell me what he would vote because I would probably not like him anymore, but he said he spent many hours researching, etc. And I can guess that he votes for Kotlebas, People's Party. And about the speed, the EU takes about 2 to 3 years to pass a law through its institutions. Polish government nowadays takes about 2 hours. So, that's just to keep in mind.
I think for the PR and communication, so I would say, I didn't say it's for everyone. I'm just saying for young people now, it's easier when it's clear. I'm not saying that people don't spend the time to do that. They don't spend the time to read. And I'm not saying that's the only way to do it. But making it clearer will be helping and making it more simple. That's all I'm saying, that with all that information that I'm looking into on my Facebook, on my Instagram, I'm getting a lot of information daily. And even with my capacity now on maternity leave, I don't have much work. I can't process all that information. I don't know what's happening in Turkey, at the same time in Greece, and at the same time in Austria, and at the same time in Slovakia, to make a comprehensive decision on how I'm going to vote for EU in my own country. It's a lot of info. And I think that makes sense that you're saying you don't have to be so informed to not vote for Nazi. But at the same time, a lot of people forget what the history is. We have a lot of videos in Slovakia where 18-year-old boys stand up like this and they say, we don't believe Auschwitz happened. And it is the lack of information that's happening right now. There's too much information that it's also intelligence levels. Of course, they don't read up enough, but there's so much that's happening. How can you choose and filter through? What I'm saying is, don't make it more instant. Just make it simpler. And it's not about PR. Don't make it super simple just because, but just make it clearer for the people can make a better decision, much more black or white than grayer. And I completely believe it's all about values. That's why we're, I think, all sitting here, because we all believe in something and we have a certain moral compass. So I think all those who have that moral compass are much more prone to read and make a more educated decision. Unfortunately, not everyone has that moral compass, and that simplicity can help.
Hi, thank you. My name is Dana Diacono. I've been working in international affairs for a long, long time, more specifically in democratization. And going back to this question that you launched in the panel about where are we with democracy today, I was wondering about this while working around the world with political parties, NGOs, or informal citizen groups trying to have an impact on policy or without using big words, really changing their societies and making their societies better. And I'm thinking maybe it is a false question to try to see it, to think about the options of getting involved into parties, what I would call partisan politics, versus other types of involvement. For me, what I've learned in my experience is that maybe we should reanalyze, redefine the nature of power, and make it more about engagement, if you want. And we don't have time, but I can tell you wonderful stories of political engagement that are not partisan, that just happened yesterday in my own country, Romania, that changed the nature of politics in our country, I think, for a long time from now on. What I discovered is political parties will not change from within and just like that. I believe if we think about what I'm calling the change of the nature of power, and that comes from outside and from the pressure people put on political parties to reform and to be more representative as institutions, I think this is where the answer is. So for me, it's not about getting into politics or not, it's about the type of engagement and what kind of impact you can make as a simple citizen. And maybe that's where we should start thinking about and then, progress towards even artificial intelligence if you want. But I think it's about the right mix. And really, we don't know what the world is going to look like in terms of democracy and how should democracy look like in order to serve our interests better. But I think it's a good thing to, one of the things I've learned is do not destroy institutions because they're important. Do not wipe up political parties because they do have a role to play. I think the answer is somewhere in the dialogue and the type of interaction between these different types of institutions and how they work together on issues. So if I would leave you with two key words, I think that those would be engagement and focusing on issues.
Yeah, it's an idealist view, but the more realistic view is that people in parties or in state which are ruling are seeking power, not just only for engagement issues. This might be true, but as well as personal issues. So yeah, speaking of democracy, like. It calls in German we say Staatsbürger because the Bürger bürgt für den Staat. This means like citizenship, but you are in the ship of the state. So it's your responsibility, your individual responsibility to get things, to know something about how the state is working. And I wouldn't criticize the politicians so much and the parties. This is easy. I would much more criticize the society as a whole. It can change things. The Brexit wouldn't have happened if the youth would be going out to elections. So I would quite more search the problems within ourselves than looking at the politicians, because you get the politicians or the democracy you deserve, definitely.
I want to go back just very quickly to your question. You have a teenager who has changed the entire narrative on climate change and has done that in the past couple of years, engaging a generation of high school students to go on strike to raise awareness of what the hell are we doing with our planet. That's what I call values and vision. So being influential or being the world maker and shaker does not require any longer to be part of a structure that is fixed or rigid and has hierarchies. It requires you to have the vision, determination, and the values, and to build your support networks in a way or another. And I don't think that that has any type of constraints or limitations of any kind, and it's not dependent on a structure or another. So that's where I personally stand on how do we change the world. Sometimes it takes just a message to become an influencer. Sometimes it takes a brilliant idea. Sometimes it takes years and years of work in the background, and then one moment that triggers and spills over into a whole phenomenon. So I think that we should not limit our ideas, or we should not get stuck in certain structures.
Thank you. My name is Philip Bernarczyk. From my accent, I'm from the US. And I have a question for the moderator. I think it's a good time to bring in the press and the role of the media in this sense and how we get our information. Unfortunately, democracy is tedious, boring, and it takes a little bit of homework. That's the problem. But also an opportunity for you to give a plug for your newspaper. You sponsor the event, so if you want to take it from there. In a changing information society, these kind of questions: how do you survive and make money? And how do we survive mentally and become good active participants in democracy?
I thank you very, very much, because I have been stepping out of the role of a moderator and involving myself too much. I apologize, but you maybe found out that this topic is really dear to my heart. So thank you for giving me that opportunity. I haven't deserved it, actually. But no, I think when I spoke about the democratic recession that we saw, I think it has to do with fragmentation of the public, which is of course also supported by platforms like Facebook and social media in general, and also with the decline of the media. We see a reversal of that, and that gives me a bit of hope that we see, for instance, in the United States, the role of the press is now different. The New York Times does wonderful, that they're doing great. But in general, there is another problem with the media itself, and that's the corporate interest. For instance, Rupert Murdoch has strong corporate interests. Other media conglomerates have the same thing. And then we have Facebook, Google, and the big ones who come into this strongly. For instance, I would not be surprised if Netflix or YouTube starts with news programming, just like ABC or CBS or MSNBC in the United States. I would not be surprised. And I think there is a lot of problems in that. And I think the media has a role to play. Maybe we have failed the public in some ways. I think that's certainly something, a reflection that is going on. Talk about citizen journalism, neighborhood journalism, community journalism, all that stuff, and not being so arrogant in a sense, and this detached from the public. But on the other hand, I think I see also positive trends, that maybe the worst is behind us in terms of the business models, in terms of what's going on with journalism. And what I think is what we certainly need, whether it be what kind of media it will be, I don't know. And as you also said, it goes really fast, the technological developments. But I think that we need public space, because the demos is the public, and in Athens, the Agora, the people need a space to meet. And of course, it cannot be the Stephansplatz in Vienna, because we are too many people in Austria, even a small country. So it has to be public space where we can all come together, exchange our ideas. And I think fragmentation is a problem, because the echo chambers are huge. For instance, I don't know, I'm an Austrian citizen. I confess I never voted for the Freedom Party, and I was really surprised that they did 17% at the elections. So it means, what else should be happening? Should Strache, maybe he shoots few people on Marienstraße, then it would be even worse. But the video was there. What else? Or remember Donald Trump saying,
From the US, yeah.
grab them by the pussy. What else did we have? Also, he said, I shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, and yeah, so what? He said it actually. I think that's where I got this idea from, by the way. And he's president. He didn't have a majority in the public vote, but he's president. So I think, and we had this discussion with what you mentioned, it also with your roommate and so on. So there is it's not people have convictions. It's not that they're not informed, because the video, everything is there. And that's where I get a little bit despaired as a journalist to say, well, we think in this, have this idea of, the Enlightenment. Yeah, you just put out information. People will, on this basis, will make informed decisions. Rational choice model there is. But I think we find out that psychology plays a huge part. And I think if you think of the red cap, the baseball cap, means I'm one of you. Because that's in the areas where people vote for him, at least voted for him. Maybe it might be different next time around, but they wear these baseball caps. They meet at the truck stop, and they just grab a beer, and that's it. So I think yes, we have a role to play, but we didn't maybe. Yeah, I think the worst is behind us. So I'm more optimistic that there is kind of a renaissance of the media. But I think we're running out of time, unfortunately. I had a wonderful time here. Thanks all of you, my panelists, my wonderful panelists, too humble, some of them, and actually the wonderful audience. And I feel inspired, after actually quite a difficult time in this country, and a difficult time, I think, also in my past few days coming back from the Middle East, where also, by the way, I met a lot of wonderful young people, especially in Arbil in northern Iraq. It's interesting. I think there is something. I think there is something that the millennials, as you said, the kind of what their belief system is, and what I like about this generation, if I may say, as a guy who was born in '68 and was 21 in '89, I think there is you're not cynical. I think a lot of the millennials, that's what's lacking, and this, I think, if that's being kept, that would be great. But now, and this is wonderful, I can hand over the microphone because we have some good news now.
Yes, as being the co-host, I have this privilege. Before I give the good news, I just want to close with what Timothy Garton-Ash said in his The Guardian article just a few days ago, right before the EP elections. Let's not lose democracy to restart to appreciate it. And I paraphrased. Let's not lose what we have so we go back to restart building what we tried to build in decades or even centuries. So let's try to find the best solutions with all the means and the tools that we have. By the way, Timothy Garton-Ash is coming to GlobSec Forum, and we'll talk about the global crisis of leadership. That's just a bit of promo for the conference. And with that, I would also like to thank you for attending almost an hour and a half, which I also think it was a quite engaging debate, my fellow panelists and Thomas. And we would like to invite you in the hall for a small networking event, so you can also meet each other and exchange more views. And with that, I hope to see you next time at the next City Talk that we will organize in Vienna. Thank you.